So the first page of the Excel sheet is really just the instructions on how to fill it out. So just fill in your name, email, school, and grade, because this will be a part of your final submission. It'll make it easier for us to see how you got your results. And then that way you don't have to write everything out. You just submit a file. It makes it way easier for both of us. So the instructions here, I'll let you guys read them on your own, but it basically just says, make sure you have all of the data that you need. So in the data requirements sheet at the bottom, summarizes all of your data. And then you'll pick the tab that is applicable for your project. So whether you're working on transportation, energy, food, or waste, you'll use the appropriate tab, and you'll fill in the yellow cells only. Once you fill in the yellow cells, it'll calculate everything for you, and you'll get your final results on this totals page. Okay. So I'll keep going through this Excel sheet for now. So our data requirements, again, we have the four main categories: transportation, electricity, food, and waste. For transportation, there's a little bit more data that you need, but it is still fairly easy. The mode of transportation you'll need before and after. So if everyone remembers our baseline emissions, those are your emissions from before you start your program. So whatever you're using right now is considered your baseline. Your program emissions are your emissions once you start reducing your emissions. So that'll be after you make a change or you implement your program. So in both cases, for baseline and program, you need to know the mode of transportation. So if you start, for example, right now, if you drive to school every day, you'll need to know driving, the distance that you drive, so from your house to school. If you're traveling by car, you need to know the type of vehicle, which includes whether it's a car, van, pickup truck, motorcycle. So just a general idea of what vehicle it is, as well as whether it's gas or diesel. And if you're traveling by bus, you just need an average number of passengers on the bus at a time. I know the number will change depending on the day, depending on the time that you take the bus, but if you can just find an average, that will be good enough. For electricity, this one's a little bit simpler. All you need to know is the length of time that you're using your appliance. So whether you're calculating light bulbs or your hair dryer or your phone, your computer, you need to know how long you're using that device, both before and after. So baseline and program emissions, how long you're using your appliance or your device. You also need to know how many watts your appliance uses. But once we get to that sheet, I'll show you quickly here. We do have quite a few devices and appliances already given to you. So you can use these numbers. If the device that you're calculating is not in this list, a quick Google search should give you your answer. Okay. For food, the weight of the food is the most important thing. I know not everyone has a kitchen scale, so it might not be easy for you to know the exact weight of the food. But if you know how many servings, so for example, if you're having one piece of chicken for dinner, you can just Google average mass of a piece of chicken. So again, it would be best if you know the exact weight of it, but if you're not able to find the weight, then we can definitely take an educated guess or estimate it based on the average weight. And again, it should be fairly easy to find that on Google. For the program emissions, so the important thing here, even though you'll be reducing the weight of animal-based products, so meat, cheese, dairy, whatever you're choosing to eliminate, that weight will be reduced, but you're probably replacing that meat with something else. So for example, if you stop eating chicken, but you start eating tofu instead, you'll still have to measure the weight of the tofu. So whatever you've replaced it with, you have to weigh that as well. So tofu, beans, soy milk are all pretty common examples. But anything else, again, if it's not on that list, a quick Google search should be able to give you the emissions. And then our last category is waste. This one's actually the easiest one to calculate. Again, you need to know the weight of the garbage that you produce. You need to know garbage, recycling, and compost. So for this one, you can probably just use a bathroom scale. If you put all of your garbage into a box or a bag, just put it on your bathroom scale and you should be able to weigh it. Again, you need to know both before and after. So if you're reducing plastic, you should measure the plastic that you produce currently, which is your baseline, and then the plastic that you produce afterwards, which will be your program. The only exception for waste is for waste collection activities. So a lot of people are doing community cleanups, clothes drives, pen drives, like one-day events where you're collecting waste. For those ones, I'll get into more detail when we get to the waste tab, but it will be a little bit different there. So I'll explain that in a little bit. Does anyone have any questions so far about the data requirements before I get into the actual calculations? Great. Isabella, did you get anything in the chat box?
Arlene said, how about paper for paperless? I'm not quite sure what that means. Oh, the campaign for the paperless billing.
So do you mean like if you're reducing paper usage?
I would assume so. Yeah, she said
Okay.
yes.
So if you're reducing paper, same thing, we'll get into that when we get into the waste column. But you would measure the mass of paper that you currently use. So let's say if you're working in a school and your teacher's printing a lot of paper, you would weigh the paper that is produced currently. So let's say 100 pages per class. And then you ask them to stop using paper and let's just do everything on Chromebooks instead. You'll be able to count the number of pages that you use before and after, and I'll explain how to input it into this page after. And I see another question about smartphones and screen time. So same thing, that would fall under your electricity usage. So I will explain that in a little bit more detail once we get into that tab. I'll just go in order to make it easy though. So I'll start with transportation if that's okay with everyone. So you'll see all four tabs, so all four categories are set up the same way. The first column has more instructions on what you're filling out. The second column is your baseline emissions, so whatever you're emitting right now, currently, or I guess before your program. And then the third column here is what you're emitting after you implement your program. So for transportation, as I mentioned, this one's probably the more complicated one. It requires a little bit more data, but your first row here, how many days did you measure your baseline and program activities? So let's say you measure for 1 week, you're driving to school every day, so that would be 5 days. So you're driving, let's say it takes 5 kilometers to get to school, you don't bus, you don't walk, and others just if there's any other form of transportation that I may have missed and I didn't think of. So let's just say you drive the whole way from your house to school, 5 kilometers. This part here, the number of passengers on the bus, if you're not taking the bus, just leave this value as 1. If you are taking the bus, you can change it. So you would just put the average number. So for example, 10 passengers on the bus on average, you could change that. But if you're not taking the bus, just leave it as 1. The next part is the energy intensity. So this is where we need to know the type of vehicle that you're taking. So if you're taking a bus, I've already filled it in for you. The energy intensity for a diesel bus is 78.4 liters per kilometer, 100 kilometers. So this is essentially how many liters of gasoline you're consuming per 100 kilometers driven. So it's almost like the energy or the fuel efficiency of your vehicle. So if you're driving oops. If you're driving, we have electric vehicles, sedan, which is just a regular car. A van is a little bit bigger, so it uses more gas. A luxury sedan, an SUV, pickup truck, or sports car. So as long as you generally know what kind of car you're driving, you can fill it in. So let's just say I drive a Honda Civic. It's a regular sedan, so I'm going to put in 9.6 liters per 100 kilometers. Now you're going to go down to the third section, which is the emission factor. So here you have to know whether you drive a gasoline or diesel. Again, I've already filled in the buses for you, so it's 2748. But if you're driving, let's say most people, I'm pretty sure, drive a gasoline vehicle. So I'm going to use 2317. Okay. So you'll see now I got a result for my baselines. So based on 5 kilometers driven for 1 week, I emitted 1,112 grams of CO2 equivalents. So that's grams of greenhouse gas emission equivalents in that week. So let's go now to our program emissions. So the next week, let's say I calculate again how many times I'm going to school, but this time instead of driving, I'm going to, let's say I bus to school every day. So busing, maybe because it doesn't go straight to the school, it takes a little bit of a detour. It's a little bit farther. So let's say it takes 6 kilometers to get to school, but I don't drive, I don't walk, the bus drops me off right at school, and other is nothing. So now I have to fill in the passengers on the bus. So let's just say there's an average of about 15 passengers on the bus. So now driving, I don't have to worry about that because I'm not driving, so I don't have to fill that out. Bus is already filled out for me. Same thing in the emission factor, the bus is already filled out for me. So you'll see that there's already an emission value here. So busing, even though it's a further distance, it takes 6 kilometers, it's still less emissions. We're at 861 grams of CO2 equivalents. So this bottom part here, that's the important part. That is what you've actually reduced. So this first number, in the 5 days here that you carried out your program, this is the amount of emissions that I reduced. So 250 grams of CO2 equivalents per 5 days. So per the 5 days that I ran this program, this is how much emissions I reduced. But I've also normalized it. So if we want to compare, let's say 2 people do the same project, but one person does it for 1 week and one person does it for 2 weeks. That means our initial impact here is going to be a little bit different, but per day, we can still compare how much emissions we've reduced. So we have per day, per week, per month, and per year. So that's also something that you can talk about when you're presenting your reports or presenting your projects. You can say, even though I was only able to calculate this for 1 week, I'm going to continue this for the rest of the school year. So we have February, March, April, May, June. So almost 5 months of school left. So even though this is what you've reduced so far, you can still say, you're going to reduce a lot more if you continue this for the rest of the school year. So these numbers will be important when you're talking about your program, and when you're if you're encouraging other people to participate as well, you can show them these numbers and show them how much of an impact you're actually making over time. So I'll take a little break there. Are there any questions about transportation? Let's see.
There was one question. Somebody asked, what is active transportation?
So active transportation is anything where you're using almost physical activity. So if you're walking, biking, rollerblading, scootering, anything like that where there's no motor and it's almost like physical activity. Okay. Any other questions? No problem. Any other questions? So one person asked, my project is a walking school bus. So what should I assume the cars that the people were using before using the walking school bus? So you mean what they're driving currently, what would you use? You can either do a survey and ask all of your participants these questions. So you can either create a Google form or a paper survey that you hand out at school. It's up to you. But a questionnaire that asks them, how far do you drive to school and what type of car do you drive? So pretty basic questions. It shouldn't take them too long to fill it out. If you're not able to send out that survey, either because you don't know who's going to participate or they just don't want to answer your survey, what you can do instead is just take an estimate. So most common car is probably a sedan. So I would use 9.6 if they're driving. And the most common fuel is gasoline. Not many cars use diesel. So I would assume 9.6 and 2317. The hard part to estimate will be the distance traveled. So you would probably have to take an average of your school's radius. So every school has a radius of what students will be there, so the homeschool radius. If you ask your office, the principal, what your school's radius is, they should be able to give you a distance, and then you can make an estimate based off of your school's radius, how far most students are coming. So again, it's better if you're able to get those exact numbers from the students, like a questionnaire, but if you're not, then an estimate is kind of like the second best option, so it should be okay. Right, so we're good for transportation now. I will move on to electricity. So for this one, there's less data, but again, a lot of the numbers are given here. So the first question is, what appliances are you choosing? So there's a drop-down menu here that includes everything that's provided. So let's say I choose to hand wash dishes instead of using the dishwasher. So it's already automatically filled it out in the second space for me. This second question here, actually, sorry, let me go back to the first question. If you're using multiple appliances, you can fill it out all at the same time. So maybe I'll do two just to show you guys. So let's say I start hand washing dishes instead of using a dishwasher, and hand washing my clothes instead of using a washer. So two appliances. Light bulbs are going to be slightly different. So I will use light bulb as well, but I'm going to explain that a little bit more later. So for how many days, same thing. Let's just say we do 1 week. So I'll say 7 days and 7 days for both. So this question is where you'll need to track your impact. So you need to calculate how many hours you're using each one before and after. So let's say I run the dishwasher twice per week, and each load takes 1 hour. So right now I'm using the dishwasher for 2 hours per week. Same thing with my laundry. Let's say I'm doing 1 load per week. That is, say, 1.5 hours, let's say, for the washing machine to run. Light bulbs, the hours is going to be how long the light bulbs are left on. So the complication here is if you're only counting 1 light bulb, it's really easy. So if I'm counting my bedroom light, let's say I leave my bedroom light on for 3 hours every night, that's easy. But the complication is when you start calculating different rooms. So if I want to do my bedroom light and my bathroom light and my kitchen light, those are all different times. So I'll change all of these, light bulb and light bulb. But you probably know in your kitchen, for example, it's not just 1 light bulb, right? There's probably maybe 10 light bulbs multiple light bulbs per light. So it's not a single light bulb, but multiple light bulbs. So that's where the issue comes in with calculating light bulbs. What you can do is either keep adding rows here, and you can do light bulb again. So you can do 1 line per light bulb and then fill it out the exact same way. Or some people have chosen to create their own spreadsheet that makes it easier for them to keep track of the light bulbs. If that's what you choose to do, send me an email I can help you format your spreadsheet properly to make sure everything is included. But again, for light bulbs, it just depends on how many light bulbs you're actually looking at. It might be easier to create your own spreadsheet. So I will leave that up to you. Just send me an email with more detail for that. So we'll go back here. I'm just gonna stick to 3 appliances for now. So 2 hours for the dishwasher, 1.5 hours for the clothes washer, and 3 hours for my bedroom light bulb. Energy intensity, all given here. So my first appliance was the dishwasher. The value is 1200. Second appliance was the washer. So my value is 512. And my third appliance was a light bulb. So for the light bulb, you'll have to look on the actual light bulb itself. It's usually printed on there how many watts your light bulb is. I'm just gonna put in 60. I think that is a pretty average wattage for a light bulb. Again, if you're using more light bulbs, once you add more rows in, you'll just have to check each light bulb what the watts are. If you know your house uses all the same light bulbs, instead of checking each one individually, you can just assume that they all have the same wattage. So that's for the baseline. The emission factor, I've already input it for you. So it's 20, regardless of what appliance you're using. The emission factor for electricity is always 20. For your program emissions, same thing. So you're going to be looking at the same 3 appliances and how long you use them. So I again measured 7 days. Let's say I only run my dishwasher once and I hand wash the rest. So that's 1 hour. I don't run my clothes washer anymore. I hand wash everything. And my light bulbs, I only have it on for 1 hour. Okay, so again, it's gonna be the same energy intensities, 60. And then if we go down, we have both numbers calculated here. So my baseline emissions were 66.96, and my program emissions were 25.2 grams of carbon dioxide equivalents. Again, down here, we have per 7 days. So that's how long I ran my initiative, per 7 days. And then it's also simplified per day, per week, per month, and per year. So just like I said before, this is something that you can talk about, where if you continue your project in the future, you can say, this is what my project will do over the course of a year. So any questions about electricity? One person asked earlier about smartphones and screen time. It would be the exact same thing. I don't see phones on this list, but we do have computer. So for computer, it would be 500. If you want to do a smartphone, just Google the emissions of it. Again, it should pop up, Google the watts for it. You should get a value if you Google it. If you're having troubles finding anything, just shoot me an email and I can help you look as well. But for most major appliances, you should be able to find the wattage for it. Does that answer your question, Julia? And are there any other questions about electricity? No, nothing? Okay, so I'll move on to food now. So for food, again, your very first question is how many days did you measure? So for this one, let's say I measured my initial food consumption for 1 week, but let's switch it up and say I go vegetarian for 2 weeks instead. So initially, let's say I eat, we'll look at chicken and fish, we'll say. If you are replacing, so that's your first question, is what foods did you choose to reduce? So I'm reducing chicken and fish, and I don't eat red meat. If you do need to reduce anything else, so let's say I do chicken, fish, red meat, beef, and lamb. If you have more than 3, you can always just insert a row. So I can do beef and lamb as well. So you can put those in. For this part, under your program emissions, now you're inputting what you've replaced it with. So if I stop eating all meat, I'm probably going to replace some of it with tofu, maybe some beans, and if I'm reducing milk, so again, I can add a row here and say I'm not drinking milk anymore. I'm replacing milk with soy milk. Okay, so I've input the types of foods that I'm reducing and what I'm replacing them with. So here are the kilograms. So that is the weight that you're using. Again, I think I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a kitchen scale, you can always estimate. So you can just Google the average mass of a piece of chicken. So I'm going to try that right now. Hopefully my internet works. Average mass of a piece of chicken. Say chicken breast food. So chicken breast is 54 grams per chicken breast. So that's just an average. So let's go back to my spreadsheet. So I'll say if I eat chicken, we'll say 5 times a week, that was 54 times 5. So if you calculate that, that is 270 grams, so 0.57 kilograms, because this is all in kilograms here. So 0.57 kilograms of chicken. Let's say I'm having 2 pieces of fish per week. So again, fish fillet. Let's see if it gives us, so 4.5 ounces. You could convert that into grams, again using Google, but let's just say it's 0.2 kilograms. You would have to take a calculator or Google and convert from ounces to kilograms. But for now, for time's sake, I'm just going to estimate 0.2 kilograms. And then for beef, let's just say 0.3. So this is the mass of my chicken, fish, beef, and if you're counting lamb and milk as well, then you would just add more rows in here. Now when you get to this side, if you're completely eliminating your meat consumption, so you're going vegetarian, everything will be 0. But some people, if you choose to only reduce it on Mondays, if you're doing a meatless Monday, your value might not be 0. It'll be lower, so let's say 0.4, and 1 piece of fish, so 0.1, but you've completely eliminated red meat, so still 0. So these numbers are reduced, but they're not 0. You still have to weigh the amount of substitutes. So if you have reduced your consumption of beef and you replace it with tofu, let's say 0.3 kilograms of beef, so now you're using 0.3 kilograms of tofu instead. For beans, let's just say 0.2. And then for soy milk, again, you can Google how much 1 cup is based on the portions, but let's just say 0.5 for now. So now that you have the weight of everything that you've consumed, you just need to look at this list here and fill out the carbon intensity. So my first food was chicken. I looked for chicken on my list, 6.9. Food number 2 was fish. So again, I look for fish on my list. Let's say salmon, 11.9. And my third food is beef. So beef is very carbon intense, 27. So you can see here that's actually quite a lot of emissions. We're at 14,413 grams of carbon dioxide equivalent. So that's quite a bit, especially if we're comparing electricity. We only had 67, and transportation, we had just over 1,000. So food actually, based on this simulation, food actually emits quite a bit. And now we can input our program. So again, 6.9, 11.9, and 27. And then tofu, beans, and soy milk. So tofu is only 2. Beans is 2 as well. And soy milk. I don't see soy milk here, so we would have to Google it. So let's see if we can find anything quickly. We would say carbon emissions from soy milk. So they have pea milk, almond milk, soy milk. So 1 liter of soy milk produces 397 grams of carbon dioxide. So you would have to normalize that. They're looking at 1 liter. So let's say I drank 2 liters within that week. I would just multiply it by 2. So let's say about 800. So that would be, I think it was 794, I think it was. Oh, sorry, point is kilograms. So it would be 0.794. So you can see we've lowered our emissions by quite a bit here. And then we have the difference. So again, you have your difference per, oh, sorry, I think I meant to do 1 week and 2 weeks. So in those 2 weeks, 14 days, you reduced this much carbon emissions. So that's quite a bit. And then again, per day, per week, per month, and per year. So you can see how much of an impact you'll have if you go vegetarian for the rest of the year or the rest of the month. You can see how much of an impact you're actually making. It's actually quite a bit. Okay, any questions about food before we move on? I see some people ask some questions. Okay.
So, Alana,
Yes.
there is one question.
Okay.
So they asked, how about local foods only? Where will it fall? Transportation, or how to compute that?
Yes, so if you're looking at local foods, this sheet of the spreadsheet only takes into consideration the food itself. So basically being vegetarian. If you want to consider transportation, then you can use both sheets. So you would input the food sheet, how we've put it now, just looking at the types of food that you consume. But if you're consuming the same food, so if you're consuming, say, apples from Mexico versus local apples, that would go under transportation. So in both cases, this is maybe where other would fall under. If you're looking at apples from Mexico, you would have to calculate an average distance. So just Google Maps should be able to give you an estimate how far it is from Mexico to Toronto, or if you want to be specific, all the way to Oakville. So you would input the distance under other because we're looking at planes now. And then you just have to do a little bit of research on how, on the energy intensity of a plane and the fuel intensity of a plane. But that should be relatively easy to find. Again, if you can't find anything, just let me know. I can help you look for those values as well. So that would be food coming from Mexico. If you're looking at local food, let's say you get it from Milton, that would probably be driven from Milton down to Oakville. So you would go under driving. Again, just put an average distance from a farm in Milton to the grocery store in Oakville or wherever you live, and then fill out the rest as is. So if you're looking at the transportation of food, that would more fall under transportation instead of food. Okay. We have another question about an Instagram challenge. one challenge is Meatless Monday. How do I calculate the impact if I don't know what meat they reduced and what they substituted? So for that, for an Instagram challenge, it's a little bit more vague anyway. So this would just have to be a very, very rough estimate. And I believe I've spoken to someone about an Instagram challenge as well. It's okay if everything is an estimate. I would take the most common food. So let's say, in my opinion, I could be wrong, but I would say chicken is maybe the most common meat that people eat for lunch. So I would just estimate and say that they reduce one piece of chicken on Monday and replace it with tofu. Tofu and beans have the same emission factor anyway. So regardless of which one you use, it's going to give you the same number, the same value. So yeah, it'll just have to be a very, very rough estimate, but that is perfectly fine. Any other questions? We're good with food. Okay, so we'll move on to the last category, which is waste. So for this one, I think I mentioned earlier that there is one exception. So if you're just reducing the garbage that you produce. So let's say you use a Ziploc bag, you bring your lunch in a Ziploc bag every day. You can Google the weight of a plastic Ziploc bag, let's say for 1 week, 5 days. I'm using one Ziploc bag every day. So let's just say it's 10 grams. So that's 50 grams of Ziploc bags that I'm throwing out every week. And then recycling, we don't have to look at that because we're just looking at Ziploc bags. So the next week, again, we'll do 5 days. Now you've started taking your food to school in a reusable container. So you're not putting anything in the garbage. So we have 0, 0, and 0. So pretty easy, it calculates your emissions. So with just those 5 Ziploc bags, you've released 45 grams of CO2 equivalents. Whereas with a reusable container, you have none. So it gives you your reduction per the 1 week, and then per day, per week, per month, and per year. So fairly straightforward. If you're looking at your total garbage, what you can do is weigh each one. So again, you can just use your bathroom scale. You would just put your garbage bag on a bathroom scale, or maybe a box if you need to balance it. Put it on your bathroom scale. Let's say you have 200 grams. Let's go higher. We'll do 400 grams in the week. You have 200 grams of recycling and 200 grams sent to compost. So this is your first week. The next week, maybe you do a little bit of research and you find out that half of the stuff that you're putting in landfill can actually be recycled or composted. So we reduce the amount sent to landfill. We're sorting our garbage properly now. So we have now 300 grams recycling and 300 grams of compost. So that calculates your impact again. You have your emissions before, your emissions after, and your difference. So that's pretty straightforward so far. The only exception is for the projects that are doing waste collection activities. So a community cleanup, a clothes drive, toy drive, stuff like that. That's a one-day event. So you're not able to measure baseline versus program because it's only the 1 day. So what you do for that is at the end of your cleanup, whether it's a 1-day cleanup or a 2-day cleanup, or you do it once a week. For now, I'm just gonna say it's a 1-day cleanup. You're gonna weigh the amount that you collect. So let's say I'm doing a toy drive at my school. So students bring in all of their old toys from when they were kids, they donate them. You weigh that amount. Let's say it is, let's say 2,000 grams. So we're assuming that if you did not collect those toys, the students at your school would have thrown them in the garbage, so landfill. And we'll just say 0 went to recycling and 0 went to compost. So it's all just little plastic toys from when you're kids that we would have thrown out, but we're collecting instead. So your baseline is what would have gone to landfill. Your program then is what you did with those toys instead. So let's say you just donated those toys. So nothing went to landfill. You donated everything. So now you have 0 emissions produced. So here you have the emissions that would have been released if everything went into the landfill, and what is released now that you've donated, which is obviously 0 emissions. And then again, it calculates the difference per your 1-day cleanup. But let's say you want to do this toy drive, you want to make it an annual thing at your school. So you can multiply this and say, if I do this for the next 3 years of high school, so if I'm in grade 9 right now and I want to do this again in grade 10, grade 11, and grade 12, you can just multiply this number to figure out what your future emissions will be. Okay, so mass of the waste is the important piece of data here, but the calculation itself is pretty straightforward. So any questions about waste?
So I got a question. Hold on, let me bring it up. So it was actually about paper. The question is, how about for a campaign for paperless?
Right.
Can the student also compute the amount of paper reduced every month for each person who signed up for the paperless bill, or just for the number of days campaigned?
So that's kind of the idea behind this. So for the number of days that they've actually completed or that they plan on completing, that will be your value here. But if you're continuing this, that's why we have per week, per month, and per year, just to give you that idea. But for the actual numbers, we want it to be what has actually been reduced, or if you're completing your program in the near future, what you plan on doing. Did that answer the question? We also had a question earlier about paperless. Yeah, so the similar question for paperless billing. One thing that is important that we mention, I guess not just for paper, but for recycling in general. I'm just going to show you guys, if I send 2,000 grams to recycling, it shows that I have 0 emissions. So the problem with recycling is that the material itself that is recycled does not emit any greenhouse gases. The greenhouse gases from recycling come from the recycling plant. So the building that processes the recycling uses energy to recycle. But we're not able to calculate the emissions of your recycling. We can calculate the emissions of that building, excuse me, but that building processes all of Halton's recycling. So you'll get a number, but it won't be a number for your recycling specifically. So that's why it shows recycling emits 0. So for paper projects, it's going to show that you didn't reduce anything. So let's say our school uses 2 kilograms of paper every week and you reduce it down to 1 kilogram. Oops, right? It still shows 0. It shows that you didn't do anything. So what you have to do for that is we have to assume that the paper is actually going to go to landfill. Oops, 2,000 sent to landfill. And then by reducing it, we are only sending 1,000 to landfill. So now you get a number. Even though this isn't entirely accurate, it's an okay estimate because unfortunately, most of our recycling, maybe not most, but some of our recycling doesn't actually get recycled and it gets thrown out. So this is one assumption that you can make, is that the paper actually ends up in landfill even if you put it in the recycling bin. Another assumption that you can make is you can Google how many emissions it takes to produce a piece of paper, and you can do your own calculation. So that won't be able to use this template, but you can Google how much emissions a piece of paper releases, and then you can do your own calculation to see what you've reduced. So you have two options there for going paperless. Both of them, again, should be fairly straightforward. So nothing overly complicated, because I want to make sure that it is simple to calculate. Okay. Any other questions about paper or waste in general? Okay. If you do come up with any questions, just send them in the chat box and I'll get to them later. But I'll continue on.
So,
Those,
Alana,
yes, sorry.
sorry, so there is one question. They're asking if the plastic has to be specific, like does it have to be a Ziploc, garbage bag, or any type of plastic when you're inputting the numbers?
So if you are, the values that are used in this calculation are very, very vague. It's just garbage in general. So it doesn't matter what kind of garbage you're using, it's going to give you the same calculation. But if you do want a more detailed and specific answer, you can calculate it on your own. So you can create your own spreadsheet and look at specifically, I'll use Ziploc bags again as an example. You can specifically Google, see if you can find, I'm not sure if you'll be able to, but you can see if you can find how much Ziploc bags release. And then you can use your own value, your own calculation, instead of using the generic number. Because the numbers that are used in this calculation are just very vague for all garbage, almost like an average. But if you want to be more specific, then you can definitely do that. The equation is quite complicated. You guys can see up here in this formula bar, that is the equation that you're using. So if you do choose to be more specific, definitely send me an email. I will formulate the equation for you. I don't expect anyone to be creating a formula like this on your own. I can definitely help with that. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'll move on to our totals now. So I've gone through the 4 categories: transportation, electricity, food, and waste. If your project is only looking at one of these categories, so only waste or only food, you'll get your totals on that sheet. But I know some projects, for example, the Instagram challenge that we talked about earlier, you might have a challenge one day that is Meatless Monday, and then another day that says don't use plastic, and another day that says turn off your lights, and another day that says walk to school. So now we're looking at all 4 categories. So under totals, it adds up everything. So again, it still gives you what you've actually reduced. So if you're only running your program for 1 week, it shows you what you've actually reduced. And then it'll also show you per day, per week, per month, and per year for transportation, electricity, food, waste, and your total. So this is the important number right here, cell F5. If you're only looking at one category, your total will obviously be the same as, for example, your waste total, because these numbers would all be 0. But if you're looking at multiple categories, this cell is going to add everything up for you. So this is the important number, is your total. So when you're filling out your final report, this is the number that you want to give. So let's see if I can open that up now. Report. Okay. So one of the questions, I believe I've sent the link out. Oh, here it is. So I think most of you may have, or some of you may have already opened this and taken a look. The final report is split into 2 sections. The first section, everybody has to complete. So March 8th at midnight is the deadline. So that's a Sunday night, I believe, to submit this. It should be fairly straightforward. I know everyone's busy, so I wanted to keep it as simple as possible. First question, how many students? If you're working in a group, just let us know how many students there are. All of your names, all of your email addresses, your schools, and your grades. If you're working on your own, then obviously it's just your own email, school, and grade. This first question here is the important question. So for awards, if you want to be eligible to win awards, this is the question that's going to be judged. It's not going to be myself or Afreen judging them because we have met with quite a few students. I've replied to emails. I'm very familiar with everyone's projects. So I think it would be a little unfair for me to be choosing the award winners. So we have some other community members that are going to judge for us. Some of the workshop facilitators from the unconference in November are going to be returning as a judge. So it'll be complete outsiders that are looking at your projects. So in this paragraph, you need to make sure that you explain your project very, very well. You have to assume that the person reading this has no idea what you've been working on. I'm not going to be telling them what we have talked about already. So this question is what you're going to be judged on.
Alana?
Yes.
Sorry, your screen isn't shared to the form.
How do I, 1 second.
You have to exit out of this screen share and then start a new screen share and pick the screen.
Here it is. Is it showing now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So this question, the first questions were how many students, names of students, email addresses, schools, and grades. And then this is the important question. So I will not be the one reading this. It will be someone else, which means you need to very, very clearly and lots of detail explain what you did. So who, what, when, where, why, and how. The project is going to be evaluated based on certain criteria. So your impact, your creativity. I will send out an email once all of the criteria are finalized as well. But just make sure that this description, this answer, very clearly explains how you meet each criteria. It says maximum 3 pages. We are not expecting 3 pages at all. It can be as short as you want, as long as the content is good. We just say maximum 3 pages because we don't want our judges to be reading pages and pages and pages of projects. So don't worry about that. It does not have to be that long as you properly explain. This question here, all you have to do is submit the calculations template. If you create your own Excel file, you can submit that instead. If you handwrite all of your calculations, just take a picture and submit it. As long as you submit something, the main purpose of this is if we see a number that doesn't quite make sense, if it's either a really, really small number or a really, really big number, I can go back to your calculations and I can see where you may have gone wrong and we can fix that. So I just want to make sure that you show your work and that I can see where everything is coming from. So the easiest is just to upload the calculation template. This question here, it says cell F5. So all you have to do is go back to the Excel sheet. Oops. So all you have to do is go back here, the totals sheet, cell F5, and this is the number that you are going to put into this answer. So very, very straightforward. And then for projects that are ongoing, for example, if you have decided to do a toy drive every month, you can say in this answer, so far we've collected this much, but we want to continue this every month. By the end of the school year, we will have collected this much. So this is just an opportunity for you to show the potential of your project, because I know not all projects will be done by March 8th. So this just allows you to show what you'll be working on in the future. We have a question, can we upload the final results of the project or do we need to type in on the website itself? So for this form, you will have to type it in. It's a required question, but it should be easy. Just upload your file and then just copy and paste the number in here. You don't have to explain anything for this question. It's just the number. The main reason for that is just so that we don't have to open every Excel file and search for the number. This way we can see everyone's values easily. Did that answer the question? Okay, I assume so. So everything is a required question in this section. So I'm just going to type in any answer. Okay, and upload. Another question, if you have changed your project, you do not, if it's a completely different project, then yes, I would ask that you submit another proposal just so that I see the proposal. I want to make sure that your project makes sense and that it's easy for you to complete. But if it's only some minor changes to your initial proposal, you don't have to worry about doing another proposal. Just email me with the minor changes. Yeah, so if you're just expanding the scope, just send me an email. New students, yes. So if you're just starting and you have not submitted a proposal yet, you would still have to submit one. Only if you're changing your project, if it's minor changes, you can just send me an email instead, just to make sure that the changes make sense and that it'll be okay. So I just uploaded a random file. So section 2, you can only move on to section 2 if you complete section 1. Everything in section 1 was required. This section though is optional. So this is just if you want to be eligible to win prizes and awards. You know that there are some criteria that you have to meet. I've sent out a couple emails about this as well. The first criteria is to just complete your project. So if you're filling out this form, you've already met criteria number 1. The next criteria is to write 1 article or 10 climate-related posts on social media. As Afreen mentioned, your article can be as long or as short as you want it to be, as long as the content is good. Same thing with social media. It can be about anything you want, as long as it's related to Generation Green or climate action or climate change. Just make sure you're tagging Gen Green, Halton Climate, or Halton Climate Collective on Instagram. The next criteria is the webinars. Just select the 4 or more that you've watched. If you are participating in a live webinar, make sure that you've messaged in the group so that we have your attendance. And if you're watching the recording of the webinar, you just have to fill out this webinar quiz. It's super, super easy. It just asks you what the name of the presenters are. So in this case, it would be myself and Afreen, and then what you learned. So it's, again, there's no right or wrong answer. You would just put in what you learned from this webinar. And then the last criteria is to present at the final event. If you're not able to attend at the event, you can send me or Afreen a file. So if it's a video or a poster, you can just send it to us and we will show it for you. That way you're still eligible. And now that this is loaded, I'll just show you name, email, school, grade, which webinar did you watch, who are the speakers, and what did you learn. So it's very easy. There's no right or wrong answer, just to confirm that you did actually watch the webinar. So that is the final report. Hopefully it won't take you too long. It's fairly simple. I don't want anyone to stress over it. It's nothing complicated. And if you do have any questions, you can always send me or Afreen an email. So very quickly, I know we're going a little bit longer today than usual. Just gonna go quickly back to our website. Most of you have probably seen this already. this is our resources page of our website. So climatecollective.ca/resources. We have the toolkit from the event. We have all of the webinar information, and this is all our calculation resources. So workshop recordings, all of our webinars, all of the workshops from the unconference in November. We recorded the calculating webinar, calculating workshop, and we've uploaded the recording, the slides, and the summary. So these 3 are all from the unconference in November. We also have a practice exercise and the answers and the calculation template. So this is the template that I just walked through with you guys. If you open this, download it, you can fill it out just like I showed you. The recording of this webinar will also be under webinar recordings here. So you can always go back and re-watch once you get to the calculation stages. So that is our website. And now I will go back to, I think we can go back to Afreen now. Are there any other questions about the calculations specifically?
Not about the calculations, but I got a question about the Excel sheet. Would you be able to re-email it to everyone?
Yes, I believe I may have emailed it out earlier today, but I will keep sending emails, and I'll attach it to probably almost every email. So you will get it a few more times. Is everyone receiving my emails? I sent one out earlier today. Did anyone not receive it? If you did not, send me an email or message me in the chat, and I'll make sure that you are on the list and that the emails are not getting sent to spam. So just send me a message if you did not get my email today. And Arlene will also resend the calculation template to the HMC students, just in case you haven't received it yet. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so we can go back to the PowerPoint. So I went through our website with the resources. The calculation toolkit is on the website. You can take a look at that. That gives you more an explanation of general calculations, whereas the calculation template is a lot more detailed. Okay, so just before I hand it off to Afreen, I think I covered most of the frequently asked questions, but just to review, if you do not have time to finish your project before March 8th, you can either submit what you have up until that point, or you can estimate what your project will reduce. So for example, if your project is to plant trees in the spring, you can estimate how many trees you will plant and the emissions that you will reduce in the future. So even if you're not done by March 8th, you're still eligible. There is absolutely nothing to worry about. The number that you need to report is cell F5 that I showed you guys. And if you have any other questions about the calculations, if you just want to make sure that you're doing it right, send me an email. You can include the calculation template as an attachment so that I can review it, or we can meet in person and we can do the calculations together. So there's really nothing to worry about. I can help you through all of your questions with calculations. It's nothing too complicated once you understand it. So I'm definitely able to help everybody if they have any questions. Just make sure you send me an email so that we can arrange something and make sure that figure everything out. So that is it for the calculations. Unless anyone has any more questions, just put it in the chat box, and then I will hand it back off to Afreen to finish off the webinar.
Okay, that was amazing, Alana. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Hopefully everyone understood Alana. I think she really explained it so well. Again, like she said, if you have questions, like definitely just email her, because as you can see, she's basically an expert. I will share my screen. Just give me 1 sec. I just kind of booted Alana right now, sorry.
That's okay.
All right. So Alana actually went over all of this. I did have it open with the different forms, but Alana did already show the project proposal. If you haven't already done it, you just have to fill it out really quickly. I know most of you have actually already submitted it, so no worries. The second step is obviously to execute your initiative in your community, which I know a lot of you have done. So congratulations, keep going, you're almost there. For calculating, again, Alana showed the spreadsheet. It's very detailed, and hopefully this webinar was super helpful for you guys and kind of understanding how to input your different values. Of course, email her if you have questions. And then the final report was the final sheet that she showed you, which had 2 pages where you had to upload your project. And then the second one was just detailing for your eligibility for the awards. Again, she just showed this, so I don't want to re-show it to you guys again. And these are just our resources. Again, Alana showed these already for the webinar schedule, descriptions, the slides. There's also the toolkit, workshop summaries, the measuring and tracking resources. So please use these. They're very helpful and they'll help you complete the end goal of your project. And again, just email us. Our emails are right there. We're always happy to answer any questions that you might have. However small, we're here for you. And these are just our reminders. So this webinar will be posted on our website tomorrow. If you're needing promotion for your projects, please do the hashtag #GenGreen or at Halton Climate for Twitter or the Instagram Halton Climate Collective, and we will definitely repost it for you. Please do the project proposal. It's due ASAP. I know a lot of you have already done this, so you don't have to redo it. Our next webinar is on March 3rd. So this is just the final submission Q&A. Like if you have any last minute questions about your project, how to implement it, or maybe even just how to calculate that final value, please attend because it's just for you to ask questions to us. And then like Alana walked it through, the final report form is due March 8th. And it's really quick and easy, nothing to be stressed about. But again, like we said, do try to be a bit detailed for the judging portion because Alana and I won't be the judges as we will be a bit biased because we're more, we know more about your project than the judges would. So just make sure you're very detailed that, you know, someone looking in from the outside will understand. And then we hope to see you all at the wrap-up event on March 20th. Alana will be emailing out the registrations soon. It's not mandatory to come, but I think it's going to be a really fun time. And we hope to see you there. So this is us, Alana and me. Please email us if you have questions or if you want to do a one-on-one with Alana, like to walk through your project, please email her directly to kind of schedule a time. The deadline is approaching. You have 1 more month. So I really recommend to use that resource. And we appreciate you coming on and asking so many questions. If you guys still have questions, Alana and I are going to be on for maybe 5 more minutes, just in case you guys have some wrapping up questions. So please feel free to either unmute yourself and ask it or just to message on the chat box. We're here for you for the next few minutes. And if you have time, please, please, please do the post-webinar feedback. We would really appreciate anything you have to say. We do want to improve on our webinars so we can do this again another year. And yeah, amazing, guys. Thanks so much for coming. You're welcome to log off now. If you haven't already, please message the chat box for your attendance. So first name, last name, grade, and school. requests for volunteering hours and just to make sure we know who's coming on. So thanks guys, and good luck with your projects. We're really excited to see what happens.